It's really important for us to be people who are prepared, not just for these types of things, but in life and in our spiritual lives, that we are truly prepared for what's really most important in our walk with Jesus. I want to talk for a minute about the 2 days before Jesus was arrested and the 3 days before he was crucified. It was 2 days before Passover, and Jesus was teaching. He was out in Jerusalem. He had arrived in the triumphal entry, and he was teaching the people. And he had, in Matthew 24 and 25 especially, a theme that was running through the lessons that he was teaching. And he was teaching in Matthew 24 about some really difficult things that were about to come, and some persecution and some hardships that they were about to face, and how to be ready for those things, and how to live and act when those things happened. Among the things that he was predicting was the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple that would happen about 40 years after Jesus gave those teachings in the beginning of Matthew 24. And at the end of Matthew 24, Jesus has some instruction on the day and the hour unknown, that we have to be ready, because we don't know when these things are going to take place, and we don't know even when Jesus is going to return. This could be in our lifetime, it could be 1,000 years from now. We really just don't know when this is going to happen, but that means that we have to live every day prepared. We cannot be complacent. When we don't think something's going to happen, or we're just not prepared for it, we can live a life of complacency. Or we can also live a life of unnecessary urgency, when we're urgent in the wrong things and we busy ourselves in the wrong things. But we need a sense of urgency toward the right things, the things that are most productive, the things that we're really called to be doing and called to be a part of as Christians, our purposes in Christ, to have a real sense of urgency in fulfilling those purposes, because the day and the hour truly is unknown. First and foremost, when Jesus is going to come back. And I don't mean like doom and gloom or fear tactics or anything like that, but we truly don't know when our lives will end. Effectively, when our lives end, when we die, from a practical standpoint for us as individuals, it's as good as Jesus coming back, because we don't have any more life on this earth to live from that point until Jesus returns and the resurrection happens. And so, us dying, from a readiness perspective, is the same as Jesus coming back. And so we have to be prepared for that. We have to live lives of intentionality. We have to live lives that are prepared, not just for Jesus to return, but to live the kind of life now that Jesus has for us to live, and to be in people's lives, and to be touching lives and changing lives, and to be salt and light in this earth, at a city on the hill that Jesus has called us to be. We have to be people who are prepared. The next thing that Jesus teaches, again, Matthew 24, now moving into 25, it's all one continuous theme. He teaches on the 10 virgins who are waiting for the bridegroom to come for the wedding. And those 10 virgins have lamps and oil for their lamps, and they have these lamps burning because they're awaiting his arrival for this wedding. And 5 of them have enough oil, but 5 of them don't. And they hear the call that the bridegroom is on his way, that he could appear at any time. So the 5 who are unprepared begin asking the 5 who are prepared to give them some oil for their lamps. But the 5 who are prepared they say, we can't do that. We may not have enough oil for ourselves. Go to those who buy oil and find some oil for yourself. So the 5 who don't have oil, they go out and they find a merchant to buy some oil from. But by the time they get back, the bridegroom has arrived, and they've shut the gates to the house, and they won't let those attendants, the ones who are waiting back in the house, to have their lights there for the bridegroom. They've missed their opportunity because they had gotten complacent. They were unprepared. They were not ready for what was most important. Who knows exactly why that was? Jesus doesn't tell us. It's a story, it's a parable, and so there's really not more to the story than what Jesus tells us. We could try to make application to our lives and think about, what is the oil, and what does it mean to be prepared, and what are some things that keep us from having enough oil, or keep us from thinking ahead like that, to really be prepared for what's next, for what's coming. We need to be prepared, church, for what's next and for what's coming, because in unusual times comes unusual opportunities, and even the normal opportunities we just might not have been in tune with, we can be more in tune with now than we were before. And so we want to be like the 5 who are prepared, who had the oil, because they got to go in the house for the great wedding between Christ and his church, and experience just the joy of being a part of such an amazing celebration, that God has great things in store, and we want to be prepared for that, not just for the future, but the life that we live now as prepared people with the right sense of urgency about the right things is very important. So let's not be complacent. And let's not be urgent about the wrong things. We can be urgent about the wrong things, and that's tiring. There's a book by John Cotter called Leading Change, and one called Sense of Urgency. And in that book he talks about the differences between complacency and urgency over the wrong things, and then urgency over the right things. And he says that those who are urgent over the wrong things have a feeling about things that say, this is truly a mess. We don't want to be in that position to feel like things are just truly in a mess. We want to have a sense of urgency over the right things, like pleasing God, and like seeking saving the lost, and like living lives of compassion and mercy and love, to love our neighbor as ourselves, and to love God with everything we have, and to seek a vibrant relationship with God through prayer and through study and conversation with God, again, through prayer. So these are very important issues, and Jesus doesn't really stop there. But before we continue on in Matthew 25 with probably the last and most important teaching right before he goes into the Last Supper with his disciples, I want to point us to some words from Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, 24 to 27. Here's what Paul wrote. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Paul had to be disciplined because he knew that the purpose that he had in this life that God had given to him was so important. But not just even for others, but also for himself. To live a disciplined life means staying on task. It means staying on point. It means being alert and being aware and disciplining our bodies. We cannot live undisciplined lives and be as intentional and purposeful as God intends for us to be. And so Paul says, everyone's running. Everyone in this world is running. But only one in a race is going to get the crown. They don't have first, second, and third in the Isthmian Games or the Olympic Games in Greece that Paul would have been familiar with, especially the Isthmian Games. He seems maybe he was a little bit of a sports fanatic. It's a little bit hard to say, but it seems like he enjoyed that sort of thing. But he understood that only one gets the prize, and he wants to run in such a way as to get that prize. Now, in a realistic sense, we know that more than one gets the prize, that millions of us get the prize. Hopefully, many, many more than millions of us get the prize. And we have to live disciplined lives. If people train that hard to get a prize that won't last, a crown of a wreath of laurels, of foliage on your head that's going to sit on the shelf somewhere at their house and wither in the next weeks and months, how much more important is it that we run with diligence and perseverance, with a sense of urgency over proper things, and a preparedness for those things, for a crown that will last, for a prize that is eternal. There's been a documentary called The Last Dance about Michael Jordan's career in the NBA, and in that documentary he is fiercely competitive, and he wants to be the greatest basketball player who ever lived, and so he's training and preparing his life, just hours and hours and hours and hours a day for that simple point. If someone can be that diligent, can fight that hard, can be that passionate over bouncing a ball on a floor and throwing it through a metal hoop, which is a fascinating and entertaining thing to do and to watch, to participate in. I'm not downplaying that. But to devote all of your mental and physical and energy into that task, if someone can give it that much, how much more then can we? I'm not guilting us here, but I'm just pointing out, making illustration, that we have such more important purpose than that. And we need to be prepared to live into the purposes to which God has called us, heavenward in Christ Jesus, and not just heavenward, but also our purposes right now. We run in such a way as to win the prize. So Jesus' last two teachings, I said there was one, but there's actually two. In Matthew 25, the next thing he gets into is the parable of the talents. And that there's a 1-talent man, a 2-talent man, and a 5-talent man. And the reason they have the talents is because the master is going away, and in his absence he's giving the talents to his servants and asking them to use that money to produce more money. And the 5-talent man, when the master returns, and no one knows when he's going to come back, so they got to be ready for him to come back at any moment. The master finds them diligently doing the things that they've been called and asked to do, to be purposeful, to be prepared. The master finds that the 5-talent servant has produced 5 more, and the 2-talent servant has produced 2 more. But the 1-talent servant realized that his master was expecting a lot, and so he didn't want to lose it. So for fear of loss, he hid his talent and then produced it back from the ground. He buries it and he digs it up and he says, "Here, I'm going to give it back to you." And the master's like, "Well, that's not really what I was after." He was after trying. He was after taking a risk, stepping out. Even if you lose it, it would have been better to have lost it trying than to have kept it for fear of failure. I think that idea is very important for us to consider in our lives. We think about reaching the lost. Are we so fearful of failing? It was a nice alliteration. That we don't try. And how much is left on the table because we're not in the game, we're not trying. And maybe we're not trying because we're not prepared, maybe we're not trying because we're not reliant enough upon God. But we need to be people who are trying, like the 5 and the 2 talent. I think that the 5 and the 2 talent person would have been more accepted by the master had they lost 5 and lost 2 trying than the one who brought his 1 back. He would have 1, the other 2 would have 0, but bringing back the 1 having not tried would be worse than bringing back 0 and having tried. What would our lives look like if we tried? What would our lives look like if we were prepared? What sort of things would we need to be engaging in if we were engaging in the purposes of God and preparing ourselves for that? Because some of those things we may not work into for a year or 2 or 3. We may not be prepared for a year or 2 or 3, but we need to start preparing. When the pandemic hit, we all started preparing. We started putting things aside. We started maybe spending less and cutting back and going out to eat less, because that was not a thing that was so easy to do. But there's some discipline in that we had to learn. It's time for us to get prepared and be prepared. But the most important teaching has been saved for the last. And here it is at the end of Matthew 25, starting in verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" And the king, that is Jesus, King Jesus, will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Jesus is not just talking about what to do to get saved. Very tempting to think, well, it's judgment, and some are going left, some are going right, and some are sheep, and some are goats, and there's heaven, and there's hell, and all that. Let's not miss the point that Jesus, this is not a teaching in isolation. It's a teaching after a long list, starting with predictions of destruction, but the time of which is unknown, leading to the day and the hour unknown, leading to the parable of the 10 virgins. Be prepared. We don't know when it's going to happen. Leading to the parable of the talents. You've been given talents and gifts. You've been blessed and provided for. Now use that to bless other people and invest that in other people. Use it for the kingdom, because the king is going to come back and the master's going to come back, and you really just don't know when. That all leads up to this parable of the sheep and the goats. And it leads up to this, again, the culmination of this idea that we have to be prepared. And the way we're getting prepared is not about putting money in the bank or whatever, or about, buying more toilet paper, or, even giving a piece of toilet paper to somebody. That's important, and that can be a part of it. But the idea is this: what does being prepared look like? Being prepared for the spiritual realities that are to come and the physical realities that are to come. Those things are actually together. It looks a lot like feeding the hungry. It looks a lot like clothing the naked. It looks a lot like visiting those in prison, writing those in prison, studying with those in prison. It looks a lot like caring for the least of these. What does it mean to be the least of these? I believe that the least of these are those who, from a worldly perspective, have nothing to give you back. They cannot pay you back. They cannot give things back to you. They cannot elevate your social position. In fact, to spend time with the people in these situations, in the eyes of some worldly people, may actually bring you down a notch. I mean, think about the ministry of Jesus and how criticized he was for spending time with people like these. This is exactly who we're called to be with. This is exactly who we're called to spend time with and to help and to look for opportunities to assist. And those opportunities exist right here in our community. As much as sometimes we maybe think they don't, or they're not really visible, they exist and they're all around us. We drive within, a 5-second walk of homes where people are going through really hard things on a daily basis. And we have to be in tune with who's around us, look around and see. And when you look around and see someone who's different, we don't, get panicked or afraid, or what do they want, or what are they after us? It's it's a super suspicious thing. And I'm not saying walk down a dark alley, of the worst place you could possibly find at 3 o'clock in the morning. We got to be wise, but we can't just look at everyone with so much suspicion that we're missing Jesus in the community. Don't miss Jesus in the community, because Jesus is in our community, and he's found in the naked and the hungry and the thirsty and the imprisoned. He's found in the unemployed. He's found in the underemployed. He's found in the uninsured and the underinsured. And, there's work to do, church. Are we prepared? And maybe this pandemic is the preparation time where God has our attention and he's preparing us for other things, for things down the road and in the future that we could have never imagined had we just kept in the rhythm and kept in either the complacency or the urgency toward the less important thing. What is most important? What is worth being urgent over? Let's focus on those things. Let's prepare for those things, and then laser focus, attack those things to the best of our ability, to the glory of God. And when the day comes that we meet him face to face and we've loved as Jesus loved and we've taken care of the least of these, we will hear those amazing words. Come on in, faithful servant. Come on in, faithful servant. You have done the things that Jesus would do here on this earth. What a glorious thing that would be to hear. But if we're not preparing, and I'm not saying we're work our way to salvation, but because we've been saved, because God has given us grace and mercy and forgiven our sins, we can love like this. We can prepare ourselves for greater things. Just as Jesus said, you will do greater things than these things that I've done. Greater things than these. So I appreciate you watching this. You're welcome to call me, text me, email me. Again, 334-750-9919 is my cell number. So thank you for watching. God bless you.